Hi, all. This is some answers from Intuition, the free Intuition 1 class online, segment 5, how the brain is built. There might be a few answers coming also from the 7 intelligences, but we have quite a few, so I might have to break this up. So anyway, before I say anything, let me say thank you to all of those of you who have watched it, who have commented, who have sent questions. I think we're moving toward something that's really pretty wonderful, pretty amazing in terms of human consciousness here on this planet. So thank you. And for all of you who have said thank you to me, yes, you're welcome. My pleasure. Okay. So let's start here. We have, I'm probably going to butcher some of these names. Marlemper or Marlene Per or Mar Lenper, 2564. She says, thank you for that fantastic information related to our brain parts and functions. If there is a continuous noise experience in the temporal lobe, that's your sound, that's your hearing. Is it associated with damage? Is it an electrical frequency? Can the temporal lobes be fixed? Thank you for teaching us. And then I would just say very briefly that this is really, that's if there's a constant either ringing, sometimes there's a buzzing, sometimes there's a sound of something clanging, so all sorts of different sounds. Those are not related to damage as a rule. They are at least not in the temporal lobes. That is damage in the microbiome. If you don't have the right set of bacteria in your gut, that affects your hearing. The gut is known as, I think it's called the third brain. I think of it, this is the first brain. Your heart is the second brain. The gut is your third brain, and the gut is powerful. There's a whole lot that I could say about just healing yourself. But basically, that's a whole other set of questions associated with getting well naturally. So check out the book Super Gut by Dr. William Davis, MD, Davis, MD. That has a lot of answers in it for a lot of people. Your gut is critical. When you get tinnitus, it means something's wrong in the gut. Okay? And bacteria have invaded the brain. You need the gut to be repaired so that bacteria quit moving up the gastrointestinal tract all the way to the head and into the brain. Okay? Yeah. Okay. Lactobacillus reuteri. Okay, next question. Julie says, thanks, Penny. That was interesting. You made it easy to follow. And she says, couple of questions. So this goes back to the rose trumpet and hot day. I had blue for number 4, dragonfly and horse, but I don't remember what sort of bird I saw, just a white bird in flight. Just a simple white bird in flight almost always birds indicate, as a rule anyway, spiritual development. White birds indicate typically that there's a religious background that you are referring to. That's fine. It's still a bird. It still symbolizes the true spirit of yourself. Okay? The dragonfly is a wonderful symbol. It's a symbol of transformation. And the horse is the symbol of intelligence, extraordinary intelligence. Okay? The voice from the future said, remember me. Well, she says, which felt very calming, but my head has since been questioning. Is that from the future me? Are we able to remember from the future? I think the answer might be yes, but my head is doing backflips. Yes. Remember me is typically a message that says, remember who you really are. Okay. It's typically the greater being, the power, the wisdom that you carry. That's what you're trying to recall or remember. To remember is to reassemble all the members that make up yourself. Okay. Good question. Jeanette says, love from the Netherlands. Okay. Thank you, Jeanette. Maria says, where's the information about the pineal? It seems a pretty important gland to make note of. It is, but it's not. It's been hyped up a whole bunch more than it needs to be. It's important for sleep and waking. It's a responsiveness to light. There's more research that is coming out, but in this class, we're talking about the track that frequency moves along to get into position in long-term memory in the cortex, the neocortex. Okay, so that isn't really a piece of what the pineal is involved in. I mean, I'm telling you that I'm simplifying what I'm telling you, and that has to be for you to begin to grasp the critical pieces. The pineal plays a role in responding to light. And the more light you respond to, the more you wake up. But at the stage that we're at right now, the pineal is a gland that puts you to sleep when it's dark and wakes you up when the sun is shining. So we can't say a whole lot more right now. I mean, it could, but I'm not going to. Okay. So hang in there, Maria. Mary Angelina says, thank you, Penny, for all the information. I find it fascinating. So I'm wondering, how does trauma and the fight or flight response affect the brain? In my past, I grew up with trauma in my childhood and adulthood. I have heightened chemical sensitivities to the point that I avoid places or people. Avoidance of the grocery store aisle with the many detergents, soaps, cleaning supplies, candles, paints, cologne, not to mention car fumes or the thousands of man-made chemicals. Could this be the cause of damage to the limbic brain? Could you please help me understand anything about how to heal a part of the brain that has been damaged? So, okay, Mary Angelina, let me say a couple things here. If there's trauma and there's a fight or flight response, and you haven't deliberately tried to trigger that response, that same trigger, and change the response, then you're going to continue to have that response. We are creatures of habituation. So once you start reacting to something, you're going to continue that unless and until you intervene consciously to say, no, I'm not going to respond that way anymore. Okay, so whatever the trigger was, somebody was mean to you, your mother beat you, or your father beat you, or whatever. All of those traumas have to be faced, looked at, re-examined, revisited, and then there has to be a degree of understanding as to what they were going through. What did you need? What were you trying to do? You forgive yourself, you forgive them, and you have to work at producing a new response. For example, instead of cowering in fear or getting lost in hurt and sorrow and anger, or a feeling of they're not treating me right, or it's just unjust or unfair. Instead, you respond as if you were a full-blown adult to that abuse, whatever it was, and you imagine yourself responding to them and countering them with all the power you can muster. You will be surprised at how effective that is. Even though it's just happening in your imagination, consciousness or the brain doesn't differentiate between what was real and what was imagined. Okay? In terms of all of the heightened chemical sensitivities, that's a physical thing. That's not so much consciousness, although I'm going to say that when we live, which we do, in a polluted world, and we pick up all kinds of heavy metals, we're going to find ourselves being overly sensitive, overly reactive to all of those smells, all of those, some of those are wonderful. Not so much the car fumes, but cologne, sometimes that's quite pleasant. All of that is a signal to you that you have too many toxins inside of you. And don't for a minute think that toxins don't impact your consciousness, because they do. And when you try to shut down because your body can't handle any more smells, because those smells are coming from things floating in the air, and you don't want to breathe in any more of those things, the body gets into a little bit of a shutdown, a little bit of a panic, tries to stop breathing. That's not good. So yeah, that's a message to you that some cleanup has to be done. The limbic system will go into a fight or flight mode if you are in, that's a bad example. If you are in some place where you can't handle any more of that kind of toxin in your system. So think about cleaning up the body first. That's zeolite. Cilantro is a slow detoxifier, but it helps. Bentonite clay, liquid clay in suspension, especially by Sonnet, very powerful. Or you can get a powdered clay, bentonite, Mount Morillonite clay, get food grade. Don't get something that they use to seal your pond out in the field. Okay. And a little bit of that, a tablespoon of that has big impact, helps pull toxins out of the gut. So zeolite, bentonite, Mount Morillonite. Okay, any of those. Okay, good luck. Okay. So Alberti says or asks, can all parts of our mammalian brain be healed? I'm not sure that I can answer that. I'm not sure healed from what. If it's healed from destructive forces, like you had a stroke, yeah, maybe. If you get attention soon enough. Healed from being shot in the head, not likely. If you're talking about being healed from trauma, yeah, you can heal some traumas, a lot of traumas, in fact. And in terms of your response to any kind of trigger, abuse, fear, massive sorrow, the physical threat of some kind, either an animal, a car accident, your boss who's, maybe doesn't like you, or just, takes out some of his or her anger on you. All those things cause that fight or flight thing to be triggered. And once it's started, it's, you have to deal with it. So here's what I would say in case you're talking about damage that occurs in the birth process or in the developmental process. You know, I know a friend who has a child who has no brain. They call that anencephalographic or anencephalic, meaning an is without, an encephalus, which is your cortex of your brain. If you have damage in one part of the brain, another part of the brain is going to try and take over. Okay? The brain is very plastic. So yes, you can heal some of the operations by transferring them, but you can't always fix the part of the brain that was severely damaged. Okay? Sometimes, yes, not with the technology we have here now. We're getting to that point where we'll have better technology as we move into not the world of technocracy and transhumanism. That's not going to fix anything. That's going to destroy the human race down the road. But as we get into good science with honorable people, we will learn how to heal almost anything, even almost bringing the dead or half dead back to life. Okay. Next, we have a question from Yaya Vandenbrink, 2085. I'm not sure how you say that. I probably butchered that name. Question: the frontal lobe is responsible for creativity and planning. Yes, it is. My experience is that very creative people are horrible at planning, forget appointments even when they wrote them in their agenda, etc. But it's in the same area. How can these two traits be in this same area? Because the frontal lobe is responsible for, it's the area from which you plan, create, communicate, and carry out your plans. You can have a little bit of damage and it will affect your ability to carry out something. You'll plan it, but you won't carry it out. And the other thing I would say is we are such a terrible creatures. Well, maybe I shouldn't say that. We are such wonderful creatures of habit that if we can just start, it's partly an issue of self-discipline. You have to discipline yourselves to move out of just the right brain and into a place of balance between left and right brain. Okay, we haven't actually gotten to that part of the lectures. It's coming, but you have to be in balance. The best intuition uses the visions and the creativity of the right brain and the plodding, linear, got to have it all in order, got to figure out something of the left brain. When those two sides work together, you have extraordinary success in navigating your life and staying in balance. Okay, so yeah, the frontal lobe is responsible for all those things, but the person, and there can be no damage in that area, but the person has gotten into the habit of being lazy with their commitments, of being unbalanced. I mean, it's a joy to be over there in that creative right brain all the time. Once you get a taste of that, the left brain is kind of blah. Unless you're really good at putting puzzles together and figuring out how things fit together. So yeah, be patient. Okay. It's not, the brain doesn't control everything. We have some say and some discipline and some early programming and some habituated responses, and all of those things have an impact. Okay. So then we have, so Ivy Blondin says, great lesson. Thank you. Clear explanation, making it easy to understand the basics. That's good to hear because I want you to understand the basics. Okay. The brain is a complex thing. And I left out a whole bunch of parts that are not necessarily involved in the specific track that lays down memory and function. Sometimes it's involved in movement. There's all kinds of parts. So, okay. So next we have Lori says, thank you for your time. I have a question about how sustained childhood trauma affects the way the different parts of the brain work together, and if there are methods you recommend to rewire the overactive parts. I've been doing a lot of meditation work. Good for you. And I'm a lot better than I was 20 years ago, but I'm still stuck on a lot of things. I'm 64 and still find myself at times stuck in loops of catastrophic thinking. It also helped me to have a highly developed sense of empathy. Yeah, it does. And I think it was because I had to learn to read my mother's moods as a means of self-preservation. Yes, you do. That's part of the gift. Typically, when you have a situation like that, sometimes that comes up with alcohol-related family dynamics. You have to, those children learn right away to assess, okay, has he or she been drinking? What mood are they in? Do I need to hide? What do I need to be prepared for in dealing with that parent or whoever? So when you have what you call a catastrophic loop, that means the consciousness keeps taking you back to that scenario because there's something more for you to learn about handling that situation. In other words, you have more gifts. The big gift is empathy. The big gift, another big gift, is sizing somebody up instantly. Another big gift is keeping yourself safe and out of harm's way, knowing how to do that. But there are other gifts in terms of response, in terms of thinking, in terms of, there's just so many gifts. When something keeps replaying, you have more gifts that you have to go back and figure out what else was I gifted in this. Very often, one of the things that comes from this kind of childhood is you learn what not to do with your own children. You learn what you need as well as what you don't need. And you end up figuring out so much about the nature of humanity, weak spots, etc. If you ever got into a situation with that kind of person again, what would you do? How would you respond? How would you fuse that whole situation? There's more gifts in there. Okay, go after them. Okay. Let's see here. Sarah says, she says, thank you. You're welcome. So let's see. Esmeralda says, it's kind of a cute little comment. When I'm thinking of either my husband or a sister, it's when they call me. Or let's see, she's from a different language here. Let me see. When I'm thinking either my husband or sister, of either my husband or sister, is when they call me, or I do, meaning I think, or I call them. And we always say, well, I have my finger in the dial. Yes, we are all communicating telepathically all the time. And we get this feeling, we get this all of a sudden, we're busy doing something, paying our bills, doing the dishes, whatever, feeding the dog. And all of a sudden we think of our sister And if a minute or so later, or 5 minutes later, she calls. That's you picking up on her intent to call. That is telepathy in action. Okay. So good job. Okay. Let's see here. D. Fortini says, gee, that went by fast. Ready for more? Okay, it's coming. All right. The next lecture is on frequencies. Very, very interesting as well. Okay, so then, oh, wow. So I'm going to say Les and Julie ask, how can we strengthen certain parts of the brain? I have difficulty remembering people's names. I forget 2 minutes after they tell me. Also, does it damage a baby's brain when they are delivered with a suction cup or forceps? Okay, so first question, how can we strengthen certain parts of the brain? The best way to strengthen that part of the brain, any part of the brain, is to use it. When you forget people's names, that means you are stuck in the right brain. Names don't matter. You have to go over and deliberately try to memorize, create associations, etc. Repeat the name out loud when you hear it. Those are the only things you can do. If you are heavily right-brained, names are not going to be important. Okay. Sorry to say that, but you can develop that and make it important because you said so. Okay. Then she says, does it damage a baby's brain when they are delivered with a suction cup or forceps? It can, but typically doctors are pretty careful. They try to get those forceps like around the jaw, and not on the brain, not on the brain itself. That puts tremendous pressure. I mean, there's already tremendous pressure on the brain being born, coming down that birth canal. Tremendous pressure. And that's, all you can do is say, I hope there's no damage. The other thing that I think is really, really important is that you get, when that child is born, for the next 3 days, that child gets a full body massage. And not once, not twice, but every time you touch that child, you're massaging some part of that little body, because that fixes a million things, and it brings the entire nervous system, central nervous system and brain online. It brings the entire digestive system online. It brings your eyes, ears, nose, sense of touch, your sensory system online, and you are much more intelligent when you do that. Babies are much healthier, they develop so much faster. Okay? I mean, a lot faster. More on that later. Okay. So then it's a couple more. I enjoyed this. That was great. Thank you. And then Lolly says, and she just makes mostly a comment here, but I want to comment on her comment. Now I understand better why I had so much difficulty with comprehension when reading in front of others. Yeah. In grade 3, I had a humiliating experience involving reading. When asked to read aloud, I can verbally read the material, but take in nothing. All of my life, I found I could comprehend what I read better when alone and with no pressure from anyone waiting on me. For many of my younger years, I had to read every word out loud to myself to reach any level of comprehension. Lolly, that is an excellent strategy. Sometimes when I'm reading something scientific, I have to read it out loud, one word at a time. If I'm reading a novel, I can take in almost an entire page at one time. So your reading skill will differ based on what you're reading and how you interact with that material and who you're reading to or for. If you're reading for yourself, that's one thing. If you're reading for someone else, that takes some practice. That takes public speaking experience. Okay. And then she says, many years went by when I read very little. Yeah, I could not read at all for years after Kundalini. Absolutely could not read. Gradually, she says, I began reading quietly to myself, and now in my 7th decade, I always have a book or two on the go. I'm presently reading Spirit Walker. Very good. Although reading in front of others can still be challenging for me. I also did not realize you would comment about part 2 answers. So let me just say before we go any further, read for yourself. Read because you enjoy it. Go someplace where you can be quiet and just read for the pleasure of reading. Okay? Very good. Learning to speak or talk in front of others. I remember in some of my very earliest speech class experiences, literally, I thought I was going to faint. I remember wearing a skirt and somebody saying afterwards, I could see your skirt waving back and forth because you were shaking so bad. So yes, that's something that you get beyond, but you have to do it a lot in order to get past it. So don't worry. And then she says, the rose trumpet, a hot day, the color was yellow. That's the color of high intellect. The number was 3. That's a nice number. It's the first number of 3-dimensional living and understanding. Eagle, that's a very good bird. Oh, wow. That's a power bird. Okay. The cabbage worm, she had just seen one in her garden. Any kind of worm is really an indicator of the restoration of Mother Earth. Believe it or not, worms are highly involved in that process of transforming things, leaves, garbage, old trees, whatever, into really good, high quality soil. So that's a, nurturer of the earth. And then let's see what else. The dog was your number 5 mascot. That's that's male intuition. Male intuition is about protection. It's about taking care of yourself, always having what you need. Wonderful. The dog is the universal symbol of male intuition. The doll is the universal symbol of female intuition. So as you develop both sides of yourself, male and female, you will at times encounter the doll and the dog. You want both of those for your mascots. Okay, very good. And she says, questions 6 to 8, I didn't even hear the first time. On the second listen, my answers were go with the flow. Very good. Enjoy each and every day. Excellent. Yes, do that. And 8, life has been good for me. So those are beautiful messages. Okay. Just own those messages. Take those. Life is good. Go with the flow. Okay. There's really no other way to go. Otherwise, you're fighting the energies in every direction. Go with the flow. Okay. Good questions. Sharon says, let's see. My reptilian brain is in stress mode since childhood from being in an unsafe environment. I'm working on that now to get that out of my system, but it's a lot of work. Yeah, it is. But keep working. Keep working and pay attention to what I said up, at the beginning of this. If you had a rough childhood, and you are busy working with that, be sure that you take the gifts. When you plan a life that has a really rough childhood, you're planning to be able to develop certain perspectives, certain qualities, certain awarenesses, and kind of a heads up about what can go wrong, things that don't work, people to beware of, as well as be aware of, all of that. So what were you planning to give yourself? What were the gifts when you set up that life for yourself? Okay. And don't forget, for all of you that have had a rough childhood and learned a lot from that, learned a lot about paying attention, don't forget to forgive the parents who came down and said, okay, let's say one of the people plan their lives and what they want to develop in themselves. And so once you decide what you want to develop, now you have to find people that are willing to play a role so that you will experience and learn what you're trying to experience and learn from. So let's say you have a friend on the other side and you and this friend are talking about, well, I'm going to go back and I'm going to have a life and this is what I want to develop. And they say to you, well, I'm going back and I want to experience what it's like to be a drug addict, or I want to experience what it's like to be left behind by a parent, or to be hated by my child, or to be or whatever it is. And so the two of you say, okay, you come, let's say the person's going to come and be a drug addict. Then you say, okay, you be my dad, I'll be your kid. You be the drug addict, I'll experience that. And later you have to thank one another for that experience. So don't forget the thank you, even though that might be a little bit bitter in the beginning. You will begin to see the wisdom of your own self in choosing that parent or set of parents or set of circumstances, because it makes you into something you wanted, some extraordinary perspective or aspect of yourself that it becomes like this immovable rock. Okay? And that's a good thing. You want to develop the rock within. More on that later. Okay. So Sharon continues saying, I also had a tumor on my pituitary and suffered from severe headaches for 6 years. In 2015, I finally got it removed with surgery through the nose and the headaches were gone. Good for you. I have a brother-in-law who had that same surgery twice now. And it's important to free up that pituitary. Apparently, she says, the tumor became very hard, as a little like a hard rock, and it was pressing on my nerves for 6 years. They did not believe me for many years that my headaches were due to that until they saw what was in my head. I realize now, after hearing you, even more how lucky I was to get it removed without damage and without any kind of medication. Whoa, that surgery is without medication. That's a piece of work. You need to know a little bit of self-hypnosis to be able to even go through that. She says, my question is, do you think it's still possible for me to develop a higher consciousness with all of the above? Yep, I do. For me, it is the most important thing to focus on in my life, and I'm very motivated and dedicated. Thank you for the wonderful classes. Absolutely. The reason to start working on yourself is to get to higher consciousness, and there is no reason, I don't care what you've been through, there's no reason why you can't develop that. The brain has this, it's a built-in capacity to expand. Your whole system is, you're like an acorn. designed to unfold into this magnificent oak tree. So, yeah, just keep working on yourself. You will have experiences here and there. Often they're spontaneous, unexpected, that teach you a lot and that show you, yeah, you're coming along. Every so often, consciousness rewards you for your efforts. And even though we're still in the physical realm, and that's a piece of work all by itself, consciousness is going to try and encourage you to keep on developing. Okay. Good job, Sharon. Let's see. Laugh Within 420 says the visual sense is strong for me. During the past few years, when I close my eyes, I often see a spinning vortex. Yep, you do. You're looking straight through the chakra of the third eye. It's often blue. Okay. You probably, he says, or she, whoever Laugh Within is, says, the amazing thing is I began to play with the direction of the spin, and I can concentrate on the spin and get it to change direction. How does this occur? Well, I'm going to say you probably shouldn't be changing the spin. I mean, the fact that you can do that just shows you what consciousness can do. Okay? You can do anything with consciousness. An amazing array of things, but I don't think you want to change the direction of that spin. It's typically going to be a left-hand spin. If you were standing out in front of you, coming in, that it may look a little different from the inside looking out. But whatever direction it's going, leave it alone. Because if you change the direction, now instead of energy coming in, energy is coming out. Later, you might want that, but not yet, okay? You don't want to drain yourself of energy. You want to build up your energy. So breathe in right through that vortex, okay? Good question. So Use Wisdom 2 says, you're a great teacher. Thank you. You explain the brain and its functions so much better and clearer than teachers in institutional learning. No wonder most of them don't even have a clue of how to treat basic bodily dysfunctions and why they become chronic. And then Use Wisdom says, I stopped seeking their help for basic needs since the 1980s. Of course, some specialized and emergency treatments are necessary. Yep. That's true. But even that necessity would be minimized if people knew how to take care of themselves using their basic common sense and discernment while learning in school. Hopefully, the youth can learn from teachers like you in the future as we revise and reestablish the educational systems going forward. Yes, we are working on that. We are going to have a completely different kind of educational system. It is not going to involve school, sitting at a desk, memorizing a whole bunch of stuff at all. Okay? It involves development of the consciousness and of the whole person. So hang in there. Thank you for your comment. Hold the space for the education of people to change. There's so much that people have not been taught that I think is absolutely basic, critical information for us to know about ourselves, about our brain, about our consciousness, about how the body works, about how everything works together. Oh my, yeah. So, well, let's move on. Okay. So Judy C. 5221 says, I agree with the others. Wow. Maybe talking about the course, I hope. And she says, now I understand why in the 6th grade, being a nervous wreck about a spelling bee. And then she says, I never made it past the first word. Yeah, I was embarrassed and unable to stand in front of the classmates without almost being sick every time. I have never forgotten this. I was also told from a guidance director in the second year of high school that I was not smart enough to go to college. Oh, I'm so sorry. Let me apologize for that, guidance counselor. That's really not good guidance. I didn't even remember this until years later. I finally decided, after working in the customer service area, that I was going to take some college courses just for myself. Good for you. That's wonderful. I took classes that interested me, but not for a degree. Yep. You know, the degree forces you to take certain things, and they plan just how they want you to put all that information together. When you take what you want and it's very eclectic, you start putting things together for yourself. And that's a whole different reality. Okay, so good for you. Yeah, that I had an experience like that in college. I didn't study for a math exam, and I froze. I absolutely froze. I couldn't answer a single thing on the exam. So that's what happens when you get into high stress, and the fight or flight syndrome starts. The stress syndrome starts, and then you don't have access to the cortex and all that stuff that you know. So yeah. And then she says, here's what I saw in the Rose Trumpet and Hot Day. The first was cobalt blue, beautiful color. Wow. The second was the number 5, halfway there. That's excellent. Not a beginner. The third was the cardinal. Cardinal is a wonderful bird. So the cardinal symbolizes recognizing that you are important and what you have to offer is valuable. And the gifts that you have are unique, and you have a unique way of applying those gifts. Cardinal is a wonderful, wonderful bird. Let's see. And then the bee, that's industriousness, willing to work, and not just by yourself, but to work in tandem, in cooperation with others. And then the cat, whether it's a big cat or a little cat, doesn't matter. The cat is the symbol of extraordinary consciousness. And conquering that consciousness is taming the cat. So wonderful. The messages were rest and relax. I think I might borrow that. The next message was, ooh, I finally made it. Very good. And the last one was welcome home. Those are messages to you about yourself, from yourself, about your future. So, take those in, own those. Usually those messages are short, to the point, and very powerful. Welcome home means you're coming home to your real self. And that's what we're after in these classes. That's what intuition does. It builds the whole real you. Okay. So let's close at this point. And I'm going to close with the encouragement for you to really go back and listen to how the brain is built. You will hear more and different things every time you listen to it. Okay. And be aware that you are incredibly, I was going to say engineered. I'll use the word built. You are built to evolve. You have this amazing brain. And I'll say this, the brain is not done evolving. And when you need a new section added on, that brain will add it on. We're not done yet. Okay. Take care. Good questions, you guys.